horse stopped halfway up the trailer, then slowly turned away from the man who raised it. No panic, no struggle, just a quiet refusal that didn't make sense. The old farmer pulled the rope once, then harder. Still nothing. Then the horse stepped down and walked straight past him, toward someone who had been gone for years, toward a past no one in that yard was ready to face again. Dust lifted in thin spirals beneath the horse's hooves as it stepped down from the wooden ramp, the hollow thud of each step echoing across the quiet yard. The morning carried that early chill that clung to old boards and rusted hinges, the kind that made breath visible and words unnecessary. The farmer didn't speak. He stood with the rope still in his hand, feeling the slack where resistance should have been. The horse didn't bolt. It didn't circle back in confusion. It simply moved with a calm certainty that didn't belong in that moment, its head lowered, ears angled forward, not toward him, but toward the far side of the fence where a truck engine had just gone silent. He followed its line of sight. The door opened with a soft creak, and she stepped out. For a second, the world seemed to hold its breath, not in shock, not in welcome, but in something tighter. Recognition without comfort, memory without warmth. The farmer's fingers tightened slightly around the rope, though the animal no longer pulled against it. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just closed the truck door with more care than necessary and stood there, as if measuring the distance between where she had been and where she now found herself again. The horse reached her before he could take a single step. Its movement was slow, deliberate, no urgency, no excitement. Just a quiet crossing of space that had been empty for too many years. When it stopped in front of her, it didn't nudge or demand attention. It waited. She hesitated. Then, almost unconsciously, she lifted her hand. The contact was light, barely there, but the shift was immediate. The horse exhaled softly, lowering its head as though something inside it had finally settled after a long, unspoken tension. The kind of stillness that didn't come from training, the kind that came from memory. Behind them, the farmer cleared his throat. "That's enough," he said, his voice steady but carrying a sharp edge that didn't quite match the calm around them. She pulled her hand back, slower this time, as if unsure whether she was allowed to touch anything here anymore. "I didn't know you still had her," she said, not looking at him yet. He stepped forward, reclaiming the rope with a firm grip, though the horse didn't resist. "Didn't have much reason to get rid of her." A pause settled between them. Not empty, never empty, just full of things neither of them wanted to name. "I'm not here to stay," she added, finally meeting his eyes. "Just here to sign the papers." He nodded once, short, final. "That's what I figured." The wind shifted slightly, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and distant rain. Somewhere beyond the fields, a gate creaked in the breeze, a familiar sound that had once meant home to both of them. The horse shifted again, but not away. It moved closer to her, just enough that its shoulder brushed against her arm, as if testing whether she would step back. She didn't. That small choice didn't go unnoticed. The farmer turned his attention back to the trailer, gesturing toward it with a jerk of his chin. "We've got a schedule. She needs to be moved before noon." The man waiting by the truck, quiet until now, checked his watch but said nothing. He had seen enough livestock change hands to know when not to interrupt. The farmer tugged the rope once more, firmer this time. The horse followed for 2 steps, then stopped again. Not stubborn, not frightened, just done. It turned its head slightly, just enough to look back, not at the man holding the rope, but at the woman standing a few feet away, her hand still half raised, as if she hadn't quite decided whether to let go of something she couldn't explain. The rope tightened, the silence stretched, and for the first time, something unsettled flickered across the farmer's face. Not anger, not yet, but something closer to doubt. Because whatever was happening here wasn't part of his plan. The barn still smelled the same. Not clean hay, not fresh wood, something older. Damp boards, worn leather, and the faint sweetness of grain that had soaked into the floor over years. She stood just inside the doorway without stepping further, as if crossing that threshold might pull too much of the past back at once. "It hasn't changed much," she said. From across the stall, he didn't look up. Didn't see a reason to. That had always been his way. If something still worked, you didn't touch it. If something broke, you fixed it quietly. And if something hurt, you let time cover it over. Her eyes drifted to the far corner. There, tucked against the same wooden rail, was the place where they had laid the newborn years ago. Wrapped in an old coat. Too small to stand. Too quiet to ignore. She was barely breathing, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Now he glanced over, just for a second. "You stayed up with her longer than I did." "She wouldn't take the bottle for you," she replied softly. A faint shift in his posture, not quite regret, not quite pride. "She figured it out eventually." "No," she said, shaking her head lightly. "She didn't. She waited." The words lingered in the air longer than either of them expected. Back then, the nights had been colder. Not just outside, but inside the house, too. After her mother passed, silence had settled in like a second layer of walls. He worked longer hours. She stayed up later. They moved around each other like strangers sharing the same space. Except in here. In the barn, there had been something else. Something that didn't need words. She remembered sitting cross-legged in the straw, the small body of the foal pressed awkwardly against her legs, its breath shallow and uneven. She had whispered to it then. Nonsense words, half-formed promises, anything to keep herself awake and it alive. He had stood in the doorway most nights, watching, saying nothing. It had been easier that way, until it wasn't. "You left before she could run properly," he said suddenly, breaking the quiet. Her jaw tightened, but her voice stayed even. "I left because I couldn't stay." "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed, "it's not." Another silence. He returned to checking the latch on the stall door, adjusting something that didn't need adjusting. She stepped further in now, her boots brushing against straw that crunched softly underfoot. The horse, no longer small, no longer fragile, lifted its head as she approached. There was no hesitation, no testing distance. It remembered. She didn't reach out immediately this time. Just stood there, close enough to feel the warmth of its body, the slow rhythm of its breathing. "You named her," he said. She gave a faint smile, the first one that didn't feel forced. "You didn't like it." "I thought it was too soft." "And now?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the horse, on the way it leaned slightly toward her without being called. "Now I think it's stuck," he said finally. She let out a quiet breath. Back then, naming it had felt like claiming something in a house where nothing felt hers anymore. Something alive. Something that might stay. But even that hadn't been enough. "You never came after me," she said, the words slipping out before she could pull them back. His hands stilled. "I figured you knew where the road led," he replied, voice low. "I did," she said. "I just didn't think I was the only one who had to walk it." That landed harder than either of them expected. The horse shifted between them, its body angled just slightly, close to both, but belonging to neither in that moment. A quiet presence, holding space neither of them knew how to hold for each other. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the loose panels of the barn. The same sound, the same place. But nothing was the same. He straightened, turning toward the door. "Paperwork will be ready by tomorrow," She nodded. I won't take long. He hesitated. Just a fraction, then stepped out into the yard. She stayed behind. For a while, she didn't move. Just stood there, listening to the horse breathe, feeling the weight of years pressing gently but firmly back into place. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand again. This time, when her fingers touched its neck, the horse leaned in without question, like it had never forgotten, like it had been waiting. By the third morning, the rhythm of the place had begun to shift, subtly, but enough for him to feel it. He noticed it first in the way the horse moved, not disobedient, not wild, just different. It used to follow the sound of his boots across the yard, the creak of the barn door, the low whistle he never even thought about anymore. Years of quiet routines had shaped that kind of loyalty. Predictable, steady, earned. Now something in that pattern had loosened. He stepped into the barn before sunrise, the sky still pale and undecided. The horse stood near the far side, head turned, not toward him, but toward the open doorway where the light hadn't even reached yet. He clicked his tongue once. Nothing. He waited a second longer, then reached for the halter, moving with the same calm confidence he always had. When he slipped it over the horse's head, it allowed him. But without that subtle lean-in it used to give. Without that invisible agreement between them. Come on, he muttered, giving the rope a light pull. It followed. 2 steps, then stopped. He didn't yank. He never did. Just held steady pressure, expecting the usual correction. But it didn't come. The horse stood still. Not stiff, not resisting, just grounded in a way that made the rope feel irrelevant. Then he heard her voice behind him. You're pulling too early. He didn't turn. Been doing this longer than you? I know, she said. That's why I'd expect something different now. That irritated him more than it should have. He released the tension on the rope, stepping back slightly. Go on then, he said, sharper than intended. She approached slowly, not looking at him, only at the horse. Her steps were deliberate, soft against the packed dirt. No rush, no command. She didn't reach for the rope. Just placed her hand lightly along the horse's neck. Wait, she whispered. The word wasn't instruction. It was recognition. The horse exhaled, lowering its head slightly. Then, when she stepped forward, it followed. No resistance, no hesitation, just movement. Something tightened in his chest. He told himself it didn't mean anything. Animals shifted. They adapted, that was all. Still, he took the rope back more quickly than necessary. I've got it, he said. She didn't argue. That bothered him too. Later that afternoon, they worked the fence line together. Not by choice, just because it needed doing before the buyer came back. The sun sat low, casting long shadows between posts that had seen too many seasons. They didn't speak much. When they did, it stayed on the surface. Wood rot, nails, weather, safe things. Things that didn't ask anything in return. The horse stayed nearby, grazing, drifting between them like a quiet third presence that refused to pick a side. At one point he drove a nail too hard, the hammer slipping slightly in his grip. A small curse left his mouth. Before he could reset, the horse's head lifted. It took a few steps, not toward him, toward her. She hadn't moved, just stood there, watching. And somehow, that was enough. The horse stopped beside her, pressing its shoulder lightly against her arm. Not dramatic, not urgent, just certain. He noticed. Of course he noticed. You're not doing anything, he said, unable to keep the edge out of his voice. She glanced at him, confused. I'm standing. Exactly. A pause. I used to do the same thing, she said quietly. That hit harder than it should have. He turned away, focusing on the fence again, though the line blurred slightly in front of him. You left, he said. I waited, she replied. Silence again, but this time it carried weight, the kind that didn't pass. That evening, as the light drained from the sky, he made his decision. No more delay. The sale would go through first thing in the morning. Clean, final. Whatever strange shift had taken hold here, whatever quiet pull he didn't understand, it would end before it had time to root itself deeper. He found her near the porch, sitting with her arms resting on her knees, looking out over the field. We're moving her tomorrow, he said. She didn't look surprised. All right. That was it. No argument, no pushback. That unsettled him more than anything else had. You don't have anything to say about that? He asked. She finally turned her head, her expression calm, but distant. It's your decision, she said. It always has been. Something about the way she said it made the words feel heavier than they should have, like they didn't belong only to the horse. He held her gaze for a second longer, then looked away. Be ready early, he added. She nodded once. Behind them, in the fading light, the horse stood near the edge of the field, watching. Not restless, not afraid, just still, as if it already knew what morning would bring, and wasn't going to follow it. Morning came without warmth, the kind of gray light that flattened everything, sky, ground, distance, until the world felt smaller than it should. The truck was already parked by the gate when he stepped out, its engine ticking softly as it cooled. The man waiting beside it kept his hands in his pockets, giving space, saying nothing. This was business, quiet, clean, uncomplicated, or at least it was supposed to be. He didn't call for the horse. He walked straight to the barn, halter in hand, jaw set in a way that made any second thought impossible. Inside, the animal stood where it always did at this hour, head lowered, breathing slow. It didn't move when he approached. Didn't lean in either. Let's go, he said. The strap slipped over easily. No fight, no hesitation. That almost made it worse. Outside, the air carried a faint dampness, like rain that had decided not to fall. She stood near the fence, arms folded, watching without stepping closer. Not interfering, not helping, just present. He avoided looking at her. The ramp creaked under the horse's weight as it began to climb. One step, then another. The hollow sound of hooves against wood echoed sharper than usual, like something being counted down. Halfway up, it stopped. He felt it through the rope first. Not a pull, just a shift. A refusal that didn't push back, didn't rear, didn't make a scene. It simply didn't continue. Come on, he said, firmer now. No response. He stepped up beside it, placing a hand against its neck, guiding forward. We don't have time for this. Still nothing. Behind him, the man by the truck shifted his weight, but stayed silent. He had seen stubborn horses before. This didn't look like one. Move, he said again, sharper. The horse lowered its head slightly, but not toward the trailer, toward the ground. Then, with a quiet, deliberate motion, it stepped back, one step, then another. Until it was off the ramp completely, the rope went slack. He stood there, breathing harder than he expected, staring at the space where the horse had just been, as if it had broken some rule he hadn't realized he depended on. Try again, the man by the truck offered carefully. He didn't answer. He turned, took the rope, and led the horse back to the ramp, this time faster, more direct. No pause, up again, one step, two, then the same stop, the same stillness, the same refusal that didn't feel like defiance, but decision. Something flickered in his chest. Not anger, not yet. Something closer to unease. Enough, he muttered. And then, without thinking, he pulled harder, not violently, but firmly enough to make a point. The horse's head lifted this time, but instead of moving forward, it turned. Not toward the open road, not toward the trailer, toward her. She hadn't moved. Still by the fence, arms at her sides now, eyes fixed on the moment as if she already understood something he didn't. The horse stepped down again, past him. The rope slid through his fingers before he could tighten his grip. "Hey," he started, reaching. But it was already gone from his side. Not running, not breaking away. Just walking. Straight across the yard. Straight to her. Every step measured. Unhurried. Certain. He watched it go. Something inside him tightening with each footfall, like a truth forming too slowly to stop. It stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel its breath. She didn't move right away, didn't reach for it like before. For a second, it looked as though she might step back. But she didn't. Her hand lifted, almost against her own will. The horse lowered its head. And then, slowly, it bent its front legs. Not collapsing, not stumbling. Choosing, kneeling into the dirt at her feet. The yard went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold. The man by the truck took a step back, eyes narrowing slightly, not out of fear, but something closer to disbelief. He had seen trained horses perform. This wasn't that. There had been no command, no signal, no cue, just a quiet, deliberate act that belonged to no one. Her fingers touched its face, barely grazing the line between eye and cheek. The horse stilled completely under that contact, as if it had found the place it had been moving toward all morning, and in that stillness, something broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but deep enough that he felt it. He stood there, the rope hanging loose in his hand, staring at the two of them, at the space between them that no longer existed, at the years he had filled with work, with silence, with decisions made alone, at the thing he thought he had been holding on to, and the truth that it had never really belonged to him. "She was there," she said quietly, not looking at him. "That first night." He swallowed. "I know. You left after a while. I had work in the morning." "She didn't," she said. The words weren't sharp. That made them worse. The horse shifted slightly, still low to the ground, still close to her, not trapped, not held, choosing to stay. He looked down at the rope in his hand, then at the trailer, then back at them. For the first time in years, he didn't know what the next step was supposed to be, and that scared him more than anything else. No one spoke for a long moment. The man by the truck glanced at his watch, then at the sky, then back at the farmer. He understood enough to know this wasn't a delay he could fix with a schedule. "You want me to come back later?" he asked quietly. The farmer didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the horse, still lowered, still calm, and on his daughter's hand resting against its face like something that had always belonged there. For years, he had believed loyalty was built through routine, through work, through showing up every day and doing what needed to be done. And maybe that was true, but this was something else. Something he had never learned how to give. He walked forward slowly, each step heavier than the last, not toward the trailer, not toward the rope that had slipped from his control. Toward them. The horse didn't move when he approached. It didn't pull away. It didn't shift its weight. It simply stayed. His daughter looked up at him then, not with anger, not even with expectation, just with a kind of quiet readiness, as if whatever he chose next would finally be real. "I thought keeping her meant I was doing right by her," he said, voice low, roughened by something he hadn't let out in years. She didn't interrupt. "I figured, if I held on to something that stayed, then maybe the rest didn't matter as much." A pause. "But it did," he added, almost to himself. The wind moved through the yard, brushing against the barn doors, stirring loose dust at their feet. Somewhere far off, a gate tapped lightly against its post, back and forth, like a reminder that something had been left open. He took another step closer. "She wasn't the only one that left," he said. Her breath caught, just slightly. "I just made it easier for you to go." The words didn't land like an apology. Not clean, not complete, but they landed. She looked at him for a long moment, searching, not for perfection, but for something she could trust not to disappear again. "You didn't come after me," she said softly. "I know." "Why?" He exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping to the ground between them. "Because I didn't know how to ask you to come back." That was the truth of it. Not pride, not anger, just not knowing. Silence followed, but it felt different now, not like something pressing them apart. More like space waiting to be filled. The horse shifted, rising slowly back to its feet. It stood between them, not blocking, not choosing, just present, as steady as it had been from the start. He reached out, not for the rope, but for the latch on the nearby gate. The metal clicked softly as it came undone. He pushed it open, wide, not halfway, not just enough to lead something through. All the way. The field beyond stretched out in quiet, open lines, the grass moving gently under the breeze. No fence in the immediate distance, no barrier forcing a return. He stepped back, not dramatically, just enough. His daughter watched him, her expression unreadable, but something in her shoulders eased, just slightly. "You don't have to stay," he said, not looking at the horse. And maybe not only speaking to it. The horse didn't run, didn't hesitate. It stepped forward, crossing the threshold without urgency, without fear. It moved into the open field, a few strides out, then stopped, turned, looked back. Not at the land, not at the sky. At them. Together. For a moment, nothing moved. Then his daughter stepped forward, crossing the same open space, her boots brushing through the grass. He followed, slower, but not stopping. They didn't walk side by side. Not yet. But they walked in the same direction. The horse waited until they were close enough, then turned again, continuing on, not leading, not being led, just moving forward. By the time the sun broke through the low clouds, the trailer was gone. The yard was quiet again. But something had shifted. Not loudly, not completely. Just enough. And this time nothing was being held in place by fear. Sometimes what we hold on to the tightest isn't what needs saving, it's what we're afraid to face. Real strength isn't in keeping control, but in choosing to open the gate. If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting. Quiet stories where healing begins in the smallest moments.
If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts below and follow Horse Heart Healing for more stories like this.